Despite there already being harness guides for birds on YouTube, and actually some quite good ones, when I asked, you guys wanted me to make my version of the harness guide, so that's what this video is. However, because there was a lot of videos already, I thought I would sort of make a twist or make it in a way so that you might hear some tips that you don't hear in these other videos. So this is more so for the birds that don't like to be touched, because that is what Charlie is. The only time she allows me to touch her is when I put her harness on, and it's not much because she is a pioness and they are known for being a bit more reserved and not as cuddly when it comes to their wings and whatnot. You know, I can scratch her on the head, but not the body, which you shouldn't be doing anyway when you're cuddling. But because of this, this is a guide for those of you that have a bird like Charlie that doesn't like to be touched, and how you can put the harness on with minimal to no touching. With that said, you can of course just apply this to all birds, but I have just found out that this method works best for me and for a bird like Charlie. Let's just kick this off with talking about the different harness types, because even though there are a few, I would always just recommend that you get hold of an aviator harness. I'm not sponsored. If they want to, I would totally allow it, not gonna lie. The reason I would just recommend an aviator harness is because there is a lot of research behind the product, and the company has been on the market for a long time with people that keep recommending it. And lastly, I've just had a great experience with mine, and it has some elements that just makes it more safer than other harnesses. Let's get some harness anatomy out of the way. This is Charlie's aviator harness. The middle hole is for the bird to stick its head through, while the large hoops on the sides are for the wings to get through. And then the tightener should always be so that it is at the bird's right foot. That's your left, by the way. One of the core things that just makes an aviator harness extra safe is that the leash is an elastical material, so that if your bird should get spooked and fly, which has happened many times for me and Charlie in the beginning, then you won't yank your bird to the ground, but it will more gently restrain your bird so that you don't damage their lungs or their air sacs. This is why I want to add that you should be on the lookout for cheap knockoffs of the aviator harness, because they might be missing this leash type or the correct attachment that just makes this harness extra safe. I know that there are also these vest type of harnesses, but I don't have any experience with them and haven't heard much about them, so I don't know if they're completely safe, but I do know that the aviator harness is, so that is why this guide will purely be on the aviator harness. Sorry, vest users. Lastly, for the aviator harness, this is a chart from their website that you can use to find out which size of harness would fit your size of bird. So being a pionist, Charlie's is a size small. I have divided the guide into 6 steps, but there might be, days, weeks between these steps. So don't rush the process and risk that your bird will associate the harness with something bad, or that you force your harness onto the bird and then it just starts freaking out. So please be patient and maybe just go through these steps very slowly. Again, might take days or weeks. And if you notice that your bird gets uncomfortable on one of the steps, just take a step back, quite literally, and then just go from there. Good thing that it's winter, because it is way too cold right now anyway to take your bird outside. So unless you live in Oceania, I guess, then you have all winter to train your bird to get used to the harness, and again, associate it with something good so that when it gets warmer, then you're ready to take the training to the next step and maybe get them outside. Your bird might start at a different step, but let's just start off with step 1. And this is more so for the birds that have a negative relationship with the harness or get an angry response whenever you get the harness out. The training process here will start with you just showing your bird the harness, and if the bird's reaction is neutral, that being not angry or scared or any of these things, then you reward the bird for accepting the harness just being there. If your bird does react in a negative way, let's say it's anger or them being scared or whatever, it is important that you do not reward them, because then you are rewarding them for that aggressive response rather than the response that you want, and so they are more likely to repeat the aggressive response. Instead, if they react, you need to just take a step back and find the threshold for when your bird reacts. Maybe that's a meter away from the bird at the start for them to not react, or maybe it's even further. And then whenever you show the harness to them and they don't react, that's when you reward them. And then slowly you should be able to work your way closer and closer and closer to them without them reacting. If they do, again, find the threshold, take a step back. It should be so that you can have the harness in your hand beside some treats and have your bird take the treats out of your hand without having a response to the harness. The purpose behind this training and what it teaches the bird is that whenever the harness comes out, good things happen. I get treat whenever the harness is out. If I react negatively, I get nothing, and you go further away, I don't get any attention, that's bad. When the bird accepts treats from your hand with the harness laying there, you can move on to what I would call step 2. And here you hold the harness at a suitable distance from the bird, but where they would be able to stick their head through. Don't shove it in their face is what I'm trying to say, but just hold it to us where they would be able to lean forward and get their head into it. What you want to do here is try and treat your bird through the head loop, not moving the harness at all, but just so that your bird gets the feeling of the harness around their head or maybe at their cheeks, and so that they get a reward for that feeling. If your bird reacts negatively to this feeling of having the harness on their head, again, you just track back, and then maybe it's back to holding the harness right in front of the bird and just treating them beside the harness, and then slowly moving away onto them treating through maybe the big loop at first, and then you can move on to the small head loop. In step 3, you will then try and apply the head loop onto the bird. And if you are successful in doing so, remember this is a very hard step for the bird, so this might take some time. But if you're able to do so, big jackpot, loads of treats, loads of praise, because that is a part of the end goal, to have the harness or the head loop around their neck. So that is a big jackpot point, and be sure to give loads of treats and praise. If your bird here is showing signs of uncomfortableness, just take it off and then maybe treat them a little bit through the hole again. Put it on, big jackpot, take it off, treat through the hole, and then repeat that process a little bit until you can see that your bird is more accepting of the harness being around their neck. Now, step 4 is where it becomes difficult if you have a bird like Charlie that does not want to be touched, because now you need to apply the one wing into the big wing loop, so to say. So you want to start off with the left wing, which is your right, and then you try and apply the harness like this. It is a bit difficult to show you what I'm doing, but if you do not want to touch your bird, you can sort of lure the big loop around their wing, and then the bird will most likely do a sort of wing movement that will then put the harness in the right place, so to say. What you can do is just get a big treat out or have a treat between your fingers so that it takes your bird a bit of time to eat this treat while you then lure this loop around their wing. Now, even though Charlie doesn't like being touched, this is where she will allow that I maybe take her wing very shortly, just lift it up and put the harness on. But I'm not really lifting the wing that much. I'm just very gently putting it to the side just so that I can get the harness around. And that is why I think it is a good method, because you're not touching your bird for a long time, and you can actually completely avoid touching your bird whenever they get into the habit. So this step is very difficult, and it may also require some practice on your part. But remember, the core thing in this training is treat your bird whenever they display the behavior that you want, or maybe as a form of distraction while you're luring around with the harness, because that itself is a good response from the bird, just being neutral and being distracted while you're doing your thing. So again, step 4 might take a bit of time, but this is my trick for doing it with a bird that doesn't want to be touched. Step 5 might be a bit more difficult because the loop you are working with is a bit smaller whenever you get to the other wing. However, at the same time, you have done the exact same training with the bird for their first wing, so therefore it may go a bit more smooth, but requires again a bit more training on your part. Then whenever you have both of the wings through the harness, it is just a matter of tightening it, though it can also be difficult. I have taught myself to tighten it with one hand while distracting Charlie with a treat in my other hand. But again, you can also use the trick of just rewarding your bird a bigger treat. For the medium or small birds, that could be maybe a pumpkin seed or whatever that they can munch on while you tighten the harness. Normally it's not something the bird reacts a whole lot to, but on the other hand they can. So just distract them while tightening it. That's probably the best tip that I can give. Then whenever the fabric part is through, you just pull it and you have now attached the harness. Yay! Getting the harness off is a training process in of itself that people often do forget. But again, you can just backtrack these methods, that works just fine. And then it all comes down to just basically distracting your bird while you attach or put the harness in a certain way. And when a piece is where it's supposed to be, whether that's on or off, you give them a break with just loads of rewards and praises. Now, when you work your way through this training, you might notice that your bird prefers something over something else, or maybe want to take it in another way. You can totally do that. I have noticed whenever I did my training with Charlie, and also just what our process looks like now whenever we put the harness on, that Charlie would rather just have me get the harness on and off her quickly and then get a big reward afterwards. That works better for her, because again, she's not very fond of me touching her a whole lot and this process of me attaching the different things. So even getting these clips for you guys was a big challenge, because I had to do it a bit slower and I had to try and show you guys what I did, as well as applying it and taking it on and off 3 or 4 times. Charlie was actually not very happy about this because she couldn't understand why I was doing it slower. She just kind of wanted it over with, even while distracting her with treats and whatnot. I could just feel her being more uncomfortable, and that's me knowing my bird, I think, and you know yours, of course. So getting to know what your bird prefers in terms of when you need to get a break and give them treats and whatever, and when they would prefer something over maybe another method, or is it fast, is it slow. Also remember that having a harness on, or as a parrot having a harness on, it is very unnatural for them. They're not used to having anything on their body. If your bird really shows signs of uncomfortableness having the harness on, remember it's just not for every bird. Some bird might just be super uncomfortable and never get used to the feeling of having a harness on. You can help them on their way with treats and try and show them that it's not a dangerous thing, but I must say that some birds just don't like it. Moral of the story, try and combine some of these harness guides that you might find on the internet and then find out what suits your bird the most. Is it getting it on a bit quicker like Charlie and then getting an end reward? Or is it just taking it extra slow maybe? That's for you to find out, and you will find out whenever you train it, or maybe when you have trained it and you get into a habit of applying it more often. I hope nonetheless that this was helpful and that you got some tips out of it. If you did, sub and like, I guess, whatever. Bye!